Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a new video. So, after the Canadian federal election, in which Liberals maintained their minority government, gaining some seats, if I'm not mistaken, they gained 9 or 10 um, from their 2021 performance. Well, the Conservatives went up quite a bit. Once again, if I'm not mistaken, they went up 24 seats. But even though conservatives gained, liberals had enough of a lead from 2021 that they were able to maintain a 26 seat plurality. The Bloc and NDP collapsed in this election, helping out liberals, inflating their popular vote margin when Trudeau actually lost the popular vote um, in 2021 and 2019, which means this is the first Liberal win in the popular vote since 2015, where Justin Trudeau got his majority government. But ever since then, there's been discussion about secession from the western provinces. Now, this has mostly been discussed from Alberta because, as you can see on the map, there's really no noticeable red areas in Alberta. Obviously, Saskatchewan has the northern area. This was actually a Liberal flip because it had been redistricted to be more liberal favorable. But otherwise, every single Saskatchewan has been conservative for a while, if I'm not mistaken, since 2019. Though some seats like in Regina and even this election, Saskatoon, have gotten a bit closer in recent memory. But Alberta is seen in Canada as like the bastion of Canadian conservatism. It's a heavily conservative province. Conservatives usually get around 65% of the vote or so in these federal elections. If you don't, it's going to be a bad night for you. And Pierre followed suit. In the election, there was a lot of discussion about how potentially conservatives could underperform in Alberta. Mark Carney, even himself, was discussed as a possible candidate for Edmonton Centre, which ended up being way too close to run your leader in. Uh, Conservatives wouldn't know what it's like to have a leader win a close seat, though, because well, it wasn't particularly close. But even though there was some discussion about liberals potentially picking off a bunch more seats in places like Edmonton and Calgary, they ended up actually breaking even. They lost a seat. Calgary McKnight, their incumbent, was knocked off, while they barely gained Calgary Confederation, keeping their 2 seats in Alberta, while the NDP lost a seat while holding their other seat, which means that after all the discussion about Pierre potentially collapsing in Alberta, um, how Mark Carney was going to do much better in Alberta than the average liberal, conservatives gained seats in Alberta. And that means that Alberta really has stayed as a heavily conservative province and is very disaffected with liberals being in charge. And because of that, there's been some discussion about a secession referendum. Recently, we had Alberta's premier say that she would allow a referendum on separation from Canada. She has said this is probably going to be around 2026. I'd bet early 2026. You don't want to drag it on until 2027 for reasons we'll discuss later. Um, but Danielle Smith talked about how the Liberals are abusing Alberta. They're attacking them, and then Alberta's would be able to decide whether to secede or not. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Even though she's come out against the referendum, I wonder where she sides. Also, the UCP, which is the conservative equivalent in Alberta, due to a bunch of shenanigans. Basically, the conservative vote got split, so they united into the United Conservative Party to stop that vote splitting. But the UCP also is backing a bill that would make it much easier for citizen-led ballot initiatives to end up happening. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Where it's a little bit less than half because it's eligible voters in the previous general election. And this one is total registered voters. So it's like it's significantly smaller. 177,000 signatures isn't insurmountable, and any campaign would have 120 days from when they begin to collect those signatures. It'd be an uphill battle. There really isn't any concentrated effort to get a referendum on the ballot. There's been some rumors. Some parties like the Alberta Republican Party have tried to make secession a big platform of their campaign heading into the scheduled to be in 2027 Alberta provincial election. But for the most part, there's not too much of an organized effort behind this, and any organized effort is completely buffoonish. But what if it did end up happening? You know, they get a big turnout effort. They're able to get the 177,000 signatures. Turns out there are some Albertans who are favorable for secession. A lot of them upset with liberals. A lot of them who are Albertan nationalists. I don't know if any of those people exist. I get Quebec nationalists, but like Alberta is just Canada with oil. And those who hate that now they can't fill their swimming pools with oil. Very sad. Well, what if that did end up happening? Well, here's my prediction for it. Uh, I didn't include the percents here because I think it's quite obvious which way this referendum goes. This is by a provincial seat for reasons I'll talk about, and also it's the smallest group in Alberta that I can reasonably map by. But this is around a 30-point win for no. Polling shows it actually doing worse for yes, but I do think that if a general election campaign, or not general election, if a campaign were run, there'd be some people wooed to the side of secession, especially since, you have a lot of turnout, a lot of people in Alberta, like 65% of Alberta is pissed off with Mark Carney, and some of them will vote impulsively to secede from Canada. Now, this will not get anywhere close because what people don't realize, we'll bring this up again later in this video, but Alberta really isn't that conservative of a province. Now, Alberta votes heavily conservative for really two reasons. Edmonton is not a liberal stronghold. Like if these seats were all they voted the same way, that like a similar seat would vote in America. Sorry, really bad cough. Um, if these voted the way that they wouldn't if they were in America, I can't even muster up a cough again. But if they voted the same way, they would vote heavily liberal. Conservatives do well in urban areas in Edmonton, and especially the suburban areas, and especially Calgary. Obviously, you have like Calgary Nose Hill, Calgary Ignite, Calgary Skyview, Calgary Crowfoot, Calgary Signal Hill, Calgary Center, Calgary Confederation. Conservatives are doing much better here than realistically they should. Uh, this is a city. This is an urban area, and yet conservatives do well, and especially South Calgary, which I think is pretty important. A big bellwether for Alberta. Very, very conservative. When realistically, if you were using U.S. political parties or something as polarized as a secession referendum, this is primed area to swing back and forth. This is where Alberta elections are determined. This is the bellwether area. You can even see 2023. 2023, what happened is the UCP was running for a second term, and they formed a very slim government. Yeah, it doesn't show it anywhere, but the UCP did end up losing like 15 seats in this election to the NDP, which was revitalized. It was a UCP plus 6.8 or plus 8.6 popular vote. That's very narrow, very narrow. You saw Edmonton, for the most part, was swept by the NDP, as opposed to 2019, where the incumbent NDP government was running for re-election and they got blown out of the water. Some parts of Edmonton on the outskirts were relatively competitive, and like besides for this exclave outside of Edmonton and the very exurban seats, really nothing in Edmonton was good for the UCP. Then you saw the rural areas, for the most part, turn out for the Conservatives, and by rural areas I mean everything that's not Edmonton and Calgary. You saw some exceptions. From some areas that aren't too uh heavily conservative. You can even see this here. Lethbridge is much less conservative than the areas around it. But where you really saw it happen is really saw the election come down to was Calgary. Now, Northern Calgary went pretty hard for the NDP, but where conservatives were able to hold the line was the South and these exurbs of Calgary. In Calgary, you had a lot of these seats end up going conservative, and I use conservative and United Conservative interchangeably. But you had a lot of these seats that went NDP in 2015 due to the vote split, went conservative in 2019, hold for the conservative, and even amidst losses, it provided enough of a cushion that with these rural areas, they were able to win a majority and win the popular vote. Now, for a referendum, I think these urban areas would be inflamed. Even though they do vote conservative, people don't understand that secession is a very, very extreme response. Uh, you have parties like the Bloc, like the Liberals ended up getting around 40% in Quebec. That sounds like a lot, and it did put them 10 points above the Bloc. But when you realize that the Conservatives and the NDP were also there, 60% of Quebec voted against the Liberals, but they're not seceding, and even they have a better claim. Um, They have their own ethnic identity. Uh, for the most part, they're overlooked by Ottawa, even though, ironically, Ottawa's right there. Like, Quebec has a much better claim to separation at this point, and even separatism is like down 25, down 30 points in Quebec. Now, I do think Alberta, um, the polls show it as like 75-25. I think it could be a little bit closer than that. I do think there's quite a few disgruntled conservatives, but you see, especially here, uh, I don't show the margins. This is 1 to 5, 10 margins, because I could do like 80, 90, 60, 70, but that requires me to actually be a smart person. But you see Edmonton and Calgary, like, in a lot of these areas, no is hitting like 80, 85%, like something insane. Because you see, most of the liberals from 2025, most of the NDP voters from 2023 turnout. In fact, do expect turnout to be higher than 2023 and 2025 for this referendum, since it would be that impactful. And you see quite a few conservative voters defect to the no side, especially in these urban areas. Well, you also see at the same time some of these more rural areas. Some of them aren't rural. Like these have like a tiny bit of a suburban base on the outskirts of Edmonton. Same thing with Calgary, but for the most part, these rural areas are closer to 50-50. I do have some ridings voting in favor because, like, if everywhere voted against it, it would be like 80-20, and I don't think it'd be that lopsided. Um, Obviously, I'm being a bit extreme saying that yes, will be 10 points above where they're polling, but I think this is around where it would be. I think it could. There's a chance that if there's a good yes campaign, a poor no campaign, and like Carney really messes up, there's a chance it could be close. I don't think it would pass. But what if it did? Well, I I brought up earlier in this video that like conservatives win because they get votes in Edmonton and they get votes in Calgary. Uh, that's like saying, oh, Republicans will win Minnesota because they'll get like not 60, 40% of the vote in Hennepin, and 45% of the vote in Ramsey. Now, I definitely think that Alberta would be more liberal than Minnesota. You have Minneapolis, and then you have two of them. Uh, like most of the population of Alberta is in Calgary and is in Edmonton. And even if the rural areas vote the exact same, 80% conservative, 80% conservative, 80% conservative, 80% conservative, 80% conservative. Like, that's all well and good, but like you're replacing half the rural areas in Minnesota with another Minneapolis. Like they can vote 90-10 for Republican for all I care. Like you're not winning. At that point, you can't win. Um, think of it like Pennsylvania. If Pittsburgh was the size of Philadelphia, honestly even bigger. If Democrats were adding 1 million votes each out of Allegheny County and out of Philadelphia County, like there's no way you win it. And maybe long term, um, especially since the GOP coalition does seem to be shifting a bit towards doing better in urban areas, Alberta could be competitive. But like, that's a good way to pretty much guarantee that presidential elections that really shouldn't be competitive will end up competitive. Let's say, an average Republican coalition. I'm not going to pull up the map with Alberta because that would mean I'd have to edit in these electoral votes for every state. And I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. But this is a round where I'd expect the electoral map uh, to lean heading into the future. Uh, I mean, I can yeah, here, not New Jersey. Um, but I'd say in the future you have the electoral map probably looks something like this. Um, I don't think this is too controversial, assuming that Republicans do better in higher turnout years. Now, for Republicans to win, just need New Hampshire, um, or you need Wisconsin, and then if Democrats win everything else, they still lose 261 to 277. Even in this scenario, you can afford to lose Nevada. This is a relatively realistic path uh, for the GOP to win. Or let's say that you don't nominate someone who appeals to the Rust Belt, and instead you just do good in the Sun Belt, and you're able to win New Hampshire. New Hampshire is legitimately close. Uh, the state probably isn't Trumpian, and even so, was pretty close this election. New Hampshire is 100% on the table. Alberta would probably have 8 electoral votes if it were incorporated as a state. Remember, this is the most conservative Canadian province, and I'd say it'd probably be a solid Democrat state once it's incorporated into America. Because even if they secede, I don't think the majority of Albertans want to join America. So you take a scenario like this, you lose. You take a scenario like this, you lose. Uh, you take a scenario like this, well, close, but certainly not going too well. Um, Take a scenario like this, you do end up losing there. Like this, which was originally what I thought Trump's path to the presidency would be. It's closer than you'd want it, 271 to 275, um, within the margin of error. But something like this, which was for the longest time what people consider Trump's path to the presidency to be, you lose there. It's such a headache for Republicans, and it adds 2 more Democrat senators, which heading into the Senate elections, Republicans could have a bad night. They could have a good night and they could do very well, but you have to assume that the worst is possible and then build from there. This is probably Republicans' worst night. Just because after that you have some pretty solid states that aren't flipping here. Republicans still have the majority. You add 2 more Democrat senators, though, 51 to 51. Now, with Trump as president, you keep that. But if the presidency flips in 2028, or Democrats make a net gain of 1, you lose the Senate. Uh, and suddenly the Senate, which should be pretty safe Republican, ends up being competitive. Um, it's a disaster. It's a disaster asking for Alberta to be annexed. You're just handing Democrats net gain of 2 House seats, 2 Senate seats, and 8 electoral votes. And it's completely unrealistic. Alberta is not seceding. Um, Alberta is not going to be happy with Carney being in office. I'm not saying Alberta's going to be like, yes, yeah, if you're Mark Carney, we love Mark Carney. That's not going to happen. Um, but at the end of the day, secession is such an extreme measure that I just don't see it happening. I don't think that Alberta will secede. I don't think if a referendum is placed on the ballot, it will be particularly close. And even if they do secede, Republicans gain nothing from it. So if you're a Republican who wants to expand the United States, who thinks that Alberta joining the U.S. would be great, I can make a stupid argument like, oh my god, look at all this border we have to police. Oh my god, all the illegal Canadians coming in bringing drugs. Oh my god, they're going to poison our people because then we have to build a wall along this entire border. Oh my god. This is why you should oppose adding Alberta to the US. I can make a stupid argument like that. Okay, and I'm saying stupid because I heard, what is his name? The guy on Twitter, not Gunther Eagleman, but I think it was Gunther Eagleman. Uh, I'm not sure, but I heard that guy on Twitter, who's like the big news account, say it as an argument. Like, why, why, why is that our one reservation with annexing some place that does not want to join the U.S.? But it'll be interesting to watch, and I'll leave you with a final note. 2023 was the last time that the UCP majority was up for re-election. 4 years is the max time that a government can go without a snap election happening. Usually lasts that 4 years. So that means that the UCP majority, since it's a majority, unless they're polling higher, I doubt that they call in an early election. And they'd have to be polling significantly higher for them to risk that. But the UCP should be up in 2027. This referendum could sink them because if it's as lopsided as I predicted it is, which is what the polling says, which is what like fundamentals say, which is what any other referendum poll, uh, any other measure of dissatisfaction with being in the Canadian Union says, um, it's not going to be a popular move to have this referendum. And if this referendum is at all close to the 2027 election, if this is at all in people's minds, somehow, 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 this this dumbass, this fucking this woman is the stupidest woman alive. Like Danielle Smith has single-handedly convinced me that people in politics are not smarter than me because this woman has no political instincts whatsoever. And if I'm saying that as a complete buffoon, you know it's a damning accusation. Um, but honestly, I can't put it past her that she associates this referendum with her campaign. And the NDP is a horrible nominee, like a Muslim homosexual who is like a rabid progressive. That's like someone the federal NDP would run. That's not that's not a good thing. Um, but like you take a layup where in this election you should get your third term, which is insane. Yeah, they should get their third term, which is pretty big in provincial politics. That usually doesn't happen. Um, Doug Ford winning a third term was a pretty big moment for him, even though it was completely expected. Still somewhat history making. But you're taking a third term where you're likely to flip most of the seats in Calgary, or at least the outskirts of it. Uh, Lethbridge West, perhaps, probably this one rural eyesore seat, and quite a few of these seats on the exurbs of Edmonton, perhaps even do better than your 2019 performance, and you're throwing that out the window, just for a virtue signaling referendum on Alberta independence. It's complete buffoonery. It's completely stupid. I don't know why the UCP wants to go down in flames with this, but they can do what they want to do. It's not intelligent whatsoever. This is going to end horribly for the UCP, but hey, I don't give a shit. If you're stupid, you get the consequences of your actions. So, suck to suck, Danielle Smith. Have fun. But, anyways, thank you for watching. This is a fun video to do, mapping out stuff like this, talking about these hypotheticals. I might do one for Quebec independence, because that one actually seems more viable. I would, but Alberta's being more talked about. Um, and Quebec independence also seems just about as uncompetitive. I mean, I'd love it if Quebec got independence because that seems cool and it would weaken Canada, um, who really should not be able to project influence anywhere. But it's not happening. So if you want a video on that, probably can't add much. But yeah, subscribe if you are new. We are very close to 2,300 subscribers. Would be great if we were able to reach that. Um, yeah. Thank you for watching. Godspeed. Testers done out.